We're here to really get into the skin of the big stories. And today we're looking at something huge, the BrahMos missile system. Now, this isn't just, military tech. It's really become this powerful symbol of India stepping up on the world stage. So, our mission today, we want to unpack how BrahMos has, fundamentally shifted India's strategic position, how it's part of this move towards being a global power. We're looking at it from, say, 5 angles: deterrence, homegrown innovation, how it actually performs, its export potential, and, its wider strategic clout. We've got some really interesting sources lined up for you, lots of surprising details, so let's dive in. Okay, first things first. What actually makes BrahMos such a formidable weapon? I know the name comes from the Brahmaputra and Moskva rivers, hinting at that India-Russia link.
Yeah.
But the real power, that's in the hardware, right?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. The name tells part of the story, but the capabilities, that's where BrahMos really shines. First off, speed. We're talking Mach 2.8 to Mach 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so roughly 3 times the speed of sound. To give you some context, that's way faster than, say, the American Tomahawk, which is subsonic.
Right.
Imagine trying to shoot down something moving that fast.
Oh, yeah.
It gives your opponent almost no time to react.
Okay, so speed's a big one. What else?
Then there's range. Now, it started out capped at 290 kilometers, mainly because of international agreements, the MTCR. But through upgrades, that's been pushed out to 500 kilometers. And they're aiming for 800 kilometers, maybe even more, in future versions. But the real kicker, I think, is its versatility.
How so?
You can launch BrahMos from pretty much anywhere. Land-based, mobile trucks, Navy warships, submarines, even fighter jets like the Su-30 MKI.
So it's not just one type of missile.
Exactly. And having that capability, launching a supersonic missile from land, air, and sea, that's what they call a supersonic triad. Very few countries have that. It makes defending against it incredibly difficult. And then accuracy. Its CEP, circular error probable, is apparently under 1 meter.
Under a meter. What does that mean in practical terms?
It basically means it's incredibly precise. Half the missiles fired should land within just 1 meter of the target. Think surgical strike capability. So you put it all together. Blinding speed, long reach, launch from anywhere, pinpoint accuracy. It gives India the power to hit hard, fast, and decisively from multiple directions. That spells deterrence, and it spells dominance on the battlefield.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. For nation's defense planning, what does having that kind of speed and surgical precision actually mean? It sounds like a total game changer for potential adversaries.
It really is a profound shift. Traditionally, deterrence often relied on just massive destructive power.
Right, big explosions.
Exactly. But with BrahMos, India adds this layer of deterrence based on speed and precision. It means they can credibly threaten specific high-value targets without necessarily causing widespread damage or escalating things uncontrollably.
So controlled response.
Precisely. It gives them a level of control, a proportional response option that was much harder to achieve before. It sends a clear message. If you provoke us, we can inflict precise, significant pain very quickly. That definitely changes the risk calculation for any potential aggressor.
That's a really interesting point about controlling escalation. Okay, let's pivot slightly. India, for decades, was one of the world's biggest arms importers, right?
Absolutely. Consistently in the top tier.
So how did the BrahMos program, even being a joint venture, signal such a big strategic shift away from that dependency?
This is where the Make in India story really gets legs. Yes, BrahMos Aerospace is technically a joint venture, 50.5% India, 49.5% Russia.
Okay.
But India's really taken the reins on localization. They've successfully managed to produce a huge chunk of the missile domestically now. Key stuff, airframes, the navigation systems, fire control units, all made in India.
So not just assembling parts.
Not at all. It's about building a whole defense ecosystem. You've got over 200 Indian companies, many of them MSMEs, smaller businesses supplying parts.
Wow, over 200.
Yeah, it's significant. It boosts the whole defense industrial base, creates thousands of high-skilled jobs, and it's not just concentrated in one place. And just recently, May 2025, they opened a new 300 crore BrahMos production facility in Lucknow.
Specifically for BrahMos?
Yep. Designed to ramp up production, both for India's own military needs and, importantly, for potential exports. So what India's achieved here is pretty rare. They've gone from being a massive importer to being a genuine missile power and a potential exporter of that same high-end tech, all within one product's life cycle. It's a huge step towards self-reliance.
That really is remarkable. It's not just about having the missile. It's about building the whole industrial muscle to make it and potentially sell it. That speaks volumes about capability shifts.
Okay, now India often talks about its policy of strategic restraint. How did BrahMos sort of challenge that idea? And crucially, was this technology ever used for real?
Well, that doctrine definitely got a serious test with something called Operation Sindoor. This was reported by the Economic Times.
Operation Sindoor. Okay,
Yeah.
when was this? May 2025. It happened after a particularly bad terror attack in Pahalgam, in Jammu and Kashmir, which caused high casualties.
Oh, right, I remember reading about that.
What was different this time was India's response. They used BrahMos missiles for precision strikes against terror infrastructure, command centers, across the line of control.
Using BrahMos across the lost, that's a big step.
It was huge. And the reported results were striking. Maximum impact on the targets, but with zero collateral damage.
Zero collateral damage. That's key.
Absolutely key. It showed India could reach deep, strike incredibly fast, and this is crucial, manage the escalation precisely. The psychological effect was apparently massive. Even Pakistan's prime minister reportedly admitted the strikes caught them completely off guard. It was undeniable proof of the missile's effectiveness in a real-world scenario, and it showed a huge jump in India's readiness and, frankly, its strategic confidence. For the first time in a long time, a specific piece of military tech gave India real leverage. The ability to retaliate effectively for something like a terror attack without automatically risking a much wider, uncontrolled war. It changed the game for cross-border threats.
This really does raise a fascinating question then. When you have a capability like that, so precise, so proven, how does that fundamentally alter a country's foreign policy, its whole approach to handling regional tensions? It feels like a new tool in the diplomatic toolbox.
It absolutely is.
Right.
It creates what analysts sometimes call escalation dominance, at least at the tactical level.
Escalation dominance, meaning...
India now has more rungs on the ladder of response. It's not just do nothing or send in troops or launch airstrikes, which all carry big risks.
Right.
Now they have this option for a quick, precise, punitive strike that's arguably less likely to trigger a massive counterreaction because of its targeted nature. It gives their diplomacy more weight because the threat behind it is much more credible and specific. It definitely changes how rivals perceive India's red lines.
That makes a lot of sense. A credible, usable threat changes the conversation. Okay, and speaking of global standing, a big sign of a rising power isn't just what it has, but what it can sell, right? Especially advanced weapons.
Exactly. Exporting complex systems is a major benchmark.
And India hasn't historically been a big player in that market, certainly not for major systems. How's BrahMos changing that picture?
It's changing it dramatically. It's really the spearhead of India's defense export ambitions. The landmark deal, the one everyone points to, is the $375 million agreement with the Philippines.
Yes, for the coastal defense version.
That's the one. Shore-based anti-ship batteries. They signed it in 2022, delivered the first batch in April 2024, and the second just recently in April 2025.
So deliveries are happening. It's real.
It's very real. And it's not just the Philippines. There are reports, pretty solid ones, of serious interest from Vietnam, Indonesia, the UAE, even Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Mostly for that coastal defense variant.
Interesting. Why that one particularly?
Well, for many countries, especially in Southeast Asia, maritime security and coastal defense against potential naval threats is a huge priority. BrahMos offers a very potent, land-based anti-ship capability. And these deals are massive for India. It's the first time they're exporting such a sophisticated, complex weapon system. It boosts their image, hugely makes them look like a reliable, high-tech defense partner. This is especially true in the Indo-Pacific, where many countries are looking for options, frankly, to hedge against China's growing influence.
Right.
Someone used the analogy, and I think it's powerful.
Yeah.
If India can scale this up, BrahMos could be India's Kalashnikov moment.
Kalashnikov moment.
No, not in terms of sheer numbers like the AK-47, obviously, but in terms of becoming this globally recognized symbol of reliable, effective deterrence technology that comes from India. It signals India's arrival as a serious defense tech provider.
Okay, so what are the ripple effects of this? For alliances, for the power balance, particularly in that really tense Indo-Pacific region, it sounds like India is moving from just being a security consumer to being a provider, too.
That's exactly it. When India exports BrahMos, it's not just selling metal, it's exporting strategic reassurance. It's enhancing the defense capabilities of friendly nations.
Building partnerships through hardware.
Right. It creates stronger defense ties, shared strategic outlooks, especially with countries maybe wanting to diversify away from just relying on the U.S. or Russia or China. It helps create a more multipolar security environment in the Indo-Pacific, where smaller and mid-sized powers have more capability and aren't just dependent on the giants. It subtly shifts the regional dynamics.
Okay, beyond the export angle, let's look at the Indian Navy. How central is BrahMos to their modernization plans? And what's next? What's the future development path?
BrahMos is absolutely fundamental to the Indian Navy's ambitions. Their newest warships, the stealth frigates like INS Tamal, which is due for commissioning very soon, July 2025. They're being fitted with vertical launch systems carrying anywhere from 8 to 16 BrahMos missiles. That gives them serious anti-ship punch.
16 missiles on one ship.
Potentially, yes. And perhaps even more crucially, they've started trials for a submarine-launched version.
From a submarine, wow.
Yeah. If successful, that gives India a true second strike capability from the sea, meaning even if they were hit first, they could retaliate from hidden submarines. That's a cornerstone of stable deterrence, especially in a nuclear context.
Okay, so ships, submarines, what else?
And don't forget the land-based coastal batteries we mentioned for export. India is deploying those too, along strategic island chains like the Andamans and Nicobar and Lakshadweep, basically locking down maritime choke points.
Covering all the bases.
Pretty much. It all ties directly into India's wider Indo-Pacific strategy. It's about ensuring the Indian Navy isn't just a coastal force, but a proper blue water navy that can project power and protect India's interests across the entire region.
And looking further ahead, is there a next-gen BrahMos in the works?
Oh yes, the ambition doesn't stop here. Work is definitely underway on BrahMos II, which is planned to be hypersonic.
Hypersonic. Okay, what speeds are we talking?
We're talking speeds potentially around Mach 7 to Mach 8.
7 or 8 times the speed of sound.
Exactly. With a projected range maybe over 1,000 kilometers, it would use advanced scramjet engines, engines that can operate efficiently at those incredible hypersonic speeds.
Scramjets. That's cutting-edge stuff.
Very cutting edge. Test launches are anticipated sometime between 2026 and 2028, give or take. Now, if they pull this off...
Big if, but...
Big if. But if they do, BrahMos II puts India firmly in the Hypersonic Missile Club, a very exclusive club. Currently, just the U.S., China, and Russia are really considered members.
That really is fascinating. The pace of change in military tech is just breakneck, and it seems India is determined to be right at the forefront. Okay, let's broaden out again. We've talked hardware, strategy, exports, but what about perception? How is BrahMos changing the way the rest of the world sees India? Is there a soft power angle here?
Absolutely, and it's maybe more significant than people realize. The existence and proven capability of BrahMos broadcasts strategic confidence.
How so?
Well, other countries simply have to take India's defense posture, its military capabilities, much more seriously now. It's not just potential, it's proven. Secondly, as we discussed, the export of BrahMos opens doors. It creates new avenues for defense cooperation, trade talks, diplomatic engagement that just weren't there when India was only buying.
So it gives them more leverage and talk.
Definitely. And it fundamentally shifts India's global brand. For decades, the narrative was India, major arms importer. Now, it's increasingly India, technology provider, innovator. That's a huge psychological shift, both inside India and globally.
You see that reflected in international meetings.
You do. In forums like BRICS or the SKO or even the Quad, BrahMos often comes up. It's cited as India's prime example of successful self-reliant defense development, and even as a tool for defense diplomacy. Think about the Quad, for instance. India having systems like BrahMos makes it a more capable, independent security partner within that grouping, not just someone relying on U.S. tech. It's really quite striking how one piece of technology, albeit a very advanced one, can ripple outwards and affect a nation's image, its influence, its diplomatic standing in so many different ways.
So let's try and wrap this up. It's clear the BrahMos missile is much more than just another weapon system. It really stands as this symbol of India's tech capability, right? And a demonstration of actual operational success.
Definitely. Proven in combat.
And a driver for transforming its own defense industry. Plus now a tool for diplomacy and building partnerships through exports. And looking ahead, it's pointing towards this hypersonic future.
It touches all those bases.
So as India faces, all the complex security challenges ahead, border issues with China, maritime security in the Indian Ocean, BrahMos seems like it's going to remain absolutely central. It's sword and shield, as you might say.
I think that's fair.
It really does feel like a key piece in India's journey, not just to being a regional power, but pushing towards being seen as a credible global power.
Mm.
Okay, let's leave our listeners with a final thought. We've seen how BrahMos helped transform India from mainly an arms importer to a tech provider and exporter. So the question is, what happens next? As more countries around the world develop and start exporting their own advanced defense technologies, how might that reshape the global landscape? Could we see old alliances shift, new power dynamics emerge, all driven by this proliferation of high-end, homegrown military tech in the next decade or so? Something for you to think about.